Badenoch gave an interview this evening, and she's fashioned herself, of course, as a warrior against what she sees as the woke elite and the champion of hard truths. But her recent efforts are really about trying to steal headlines, trying to make a fuss out of immigration, desperately trying to stay relevant in the face of Nigel Farage's popularity. And one cannot help sensing deep desperation creeping into her political stance, a frantic attempt to wrest back control of the Conservative Party's dwindling credibility. And what she's unveiled this evening is less a well-thought-out immigration strategy and more a panicked reaction to Nigel Farage's Reform UK, looming in the background, threatening to siphon off more disillusioned Tories. Badenoch's flagship proposal, extending the period before immigrants can apply for British citizenship from 6 to 15 years, exemplifies this desperation. And the rhetoric is grand. Citizenship is a privilege, not a right. The UK is not a dormitory, and only those with real, meaningful connections should be allowed to settle. It's a policy bathed in the kind of posturing designed to sound tough while providing no real answers to Britain's economic and demographic challenges. And a lot of it is couched in language which is stolen from Farage anyway. The argument hinges on the idea that immigration is the primary cause of strain on public services, particularly the NHS and GP appointments. It's not true. The reason you can't get an appointment with the NHS, with a GP, is not to do with the fact that lots of immigrants are here, it's to do with the fact that the NHS is in a mess. It's a convenient, albeit flimsy, scapegoat. The real causes: underfunding, mismanagement, too many bureaucrats, a chronic shortage of domestic healthcare professionals because of Brexit. These are sidelined in favour of an easier narrative that plays well to the Tory grassroots and the reform-curious voters. It's a well-worn trick: deflect from governmental incompetence by blaming foreigners. In this case, immigrants. Surely we've seen this, haven't we, in the past, and maybe in the 1930s. I don't like to suggest that, but take a closer look at the numbers before the hollowness of her stance. Net migration soared under the very government that Badenoch served in, reaching a record 906,000 last year. A significant proportion of those migrants were skilled workers, including NHS professionals, individuals the country desperately needs. The notion that further tightening immigration laws will somehow fix the economy is economic fantasy. The notion that further tightening immigration laws will get you an appointment at your GP is economic fantasy. If anything, the proposed extension of the citizenship process risks discouraging skilled migrants from coming at all, exacerbating labour shortages rather than resolving them. Moreover, the punitive elements of Badenoch's policy, barring those who've ever claimed benefits or used social housing from obtaining citizenship, reek of ideological cruelty rather than pragmatic governance. The very essence of a welfare state is that it provides support when needed. To penalise someone indefinitely for having ever relied on it is an abandonment of basic social principles. If a struggling young doctor takes a brief break between training programmes and needs benefits to stay afloat, should they be permanently excluded from British citizenship? Such hardline rhetoric ignores the complexities of real-life circumstances in favour of crude sloganising. Badenoch's refusal to specify an actual migration cap further underscores the opportunistic nature of her approach. She insists numbers must come down but dodges the specifics, a classic move when one is more interested in stoking political fire than delivering real solution. This vagueness allows her to pivot based on electoral convenience rather than sound policy. In the broader context is revealing. The policy is being touted as Badenoch's first major announcement since becoming leader, a deliberate move to reassert her relevance in the face of an increasingly fragmented Tory party and the existential threat posed by Reform UK's success. The Conservatives are scrambling to out-Farage, but in doing so, they risk alienating moderate voters from the centre of the party while failing to convince hardliners that they are genuine in any newfound zeal for restriction. Angela Eagle's blunt response: after 14 years of shameful Tory failure, no one will take seriously anything they claim, captures the prevailing mood. The public has seen years of failed immigration targets, empty pledges, gimmicks designed to pander to a restless electorate. Badenoch's latest proposals fit neatly into that pattern. What Badenoch fails to acknowledge is that the electorate has heard all of this before. David Cameron promised to cut migration to the tens of thousands. Theresa May brought in the hostile environment and the Windrush scandal. Boris Johnson and Suella Braverman spoke of stopping the boats, and yet migration continued to rise because the reality is that Britain needs migrants more than Badenoch and her ideological allies would care to admit. In the end, this is not about solving the immigration problem, it's about electoral survival. It's about clawing back disenchanted right-wing voters and positioning Badenoch as a credible successor to the post-election rubble of the Conservative Party. Whether the policy itself is effective or even makes sense is secondary to its political utility. Badenoch's no stranger to culture wars, but in this case, the battlefield is immigration and the weapon is desperation. Whether this latest gambit will revive Tory fortunes remains to be seen, but I think it's very, very unlikely. What is clear, however, is that the electorate is growing weary of empty gestures like this, and Badenoch's transparent attempt at reclaiming relevance may ultimately be seen as just another addition in a long list of failed Tory immigration pledges and a gathering list of Kemi Badenoch error.